Number 1. Sean Taylor. Sean Taylor's story is one of brilliance, raw talent, and a tragic ending that left an indelible mark on the NFL. Born in 1983 in Florida, he grew up in a tough environment but quickly became a standout athlete, especially in football. His skills on the field at Gulliver Prep and then the University of Miami turned heads everywhere. At Miami, Taylor was a member of the Hurricanes' powerhouse team, where he established himself as one of the fiercest safeties in the country. He had size, speed, and a bone-crushing tackling style that terrified receivers. Scouts described him as a once-in-a-generation defensive player, the kind who could single-handedly change the outcome of a game. When the Washington Redskins drafted him with the 5th overall pick in the 2004 NFL Draft, expectations were sky high. Washington fans were desperate for a star who could bring their defense back to glory, and Taylor seemed like the perfect fit. In just a few seasons, he built a reputation as one of the hardest hitters in the league. His highlight reels were filled with jaw-dropping hits, incredible interceptions, and plays that showed not just athleticism, but an instinct for the game that couldn't be taught. Coaches and teammates described him as a player with almost supernatural ability, the kind of rare talent you only see once in a lifetime. Yet what made Sean Taylor unique wasn't just his play, it was his transformation off the field. Early in his career, Taylor was known for being private, guarded, and sometimes difficult with the media. He avoided the spotlight and rarely gave interviews, preferring to focus on the game and his family. Over time, those close to him began to notice a change. Becoming a father had softened him, given him a sense of responsibility and maturity. He spent more time with his young daughter and often spoke about how she motivated him to be better both on and off the field. It seemed like Sean Taylor was entering a new chapter of his life, one defined by growth, stability, and family. But everything came to a sudden and heartbreaking end on November 26, 2007. That night, Sean was at his Miami home with his girlfriend and daughter when burglars broke into the house. As he tried to protect his family, Taylor was shot in the leg. The bullet severed his femoral artery, causing massive blood loss. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save him, but the injury proved too severe. Less than 24 hours later, Sean Taylor was gone. He was only 24 years old. The news spread quickly, and shockwaves ran through the NFL. Fans, players, and coaches across the league were stunned. In Washington, where Taylor had become a beloved figure, grief consumed the team and its supporters. At the Redskins' next game, the stadium was filled with fans holding signs, wearing his number 21 jersey, and mourning a player who had become more than just a football star. His teammates honored him by lining up with only 10 players on defense for the first play, leaving his position at free safety empty in a haunting tribute. The tragedy cut short what many believed would have been a Hall of Fame career. Analysts often debate how good Sean Taylor could have become if he had lived longer. His talent was undeniable, and many believe he could have gone down as one of the greatest safeties in NFL history. But beyond the statistics and highlights, his death reminded the world that athletes are human beings, fathers, sons, brothers, whose lives can be fragile despite their superhuman appearances on the field. In the years since his passing, Sean Taylor's legacy has only grown. The Washington franchise retired his number, something they rarely did, and his jersey remains one of the most iconic in NFL history. Young safeties entering the league often mention him as an inspiration, studying his tapes to learn how to play the position. Fans continue to share memories of his hits, his interceptions, and the aura he carried whenever he stepped on the field. For many, Sean Taylor represents not just what could have been, but the enduring spirit of a player who gave everything every time he played. His story is bittersweet. It is the story of a young man with immeasurable talent who had begun to turn his life toward fatherhood and responsibility, only for it all to be taken away in an instant. But even in tragedy, Sean Taylor's name lives on, not only in highlight reels, but in the hearts of fans who will never forget number 21 patrolling the secondary, striking fear into opponents, and inspiring everyone who watched him play. Stories like Sean Taylor's remind us just how fragile life can be, even for the toughest athletes on the planet. And this is only the beginning. As we move forward, you'll see how many other NFL stars were taken far too soon. If you're finding these stories powerful, make sure to subscribe and stay with us until the end, because every chapter reveals another heartbreaking moment in football history. Number 2, Derrick Thomas. Derrick Thomas was more than just a linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the heart and soul of the franchise throughout the 1990s. Born in 1967 in Miami, Florida, Thomas's path to football greatness was shaped by both hardship and determination. His father, an Air Force pilot, was killed while serving in Vietnam when Derrick was only 5 years old. That loss left a void in his life, but it also gave him a quiet resilience that would later define his career. Football became his outlet, a place where he could channel his energy, his frustration, and his natural gifts. At the University of Alabama, Thomas blossomed into one of the most dominant defensive players in college football history. His speed off the edge, relentless pursuit of quarterbacks, and uncanny ability to disrupt plays made him a nightmare for opposing offenses. In his senior year, he recorded 27 sacks, setting an NCAA record that still stands. Coaches and scouts alike knew he was destined to be a star at the next level. When the 1989 NFL Draft arrived, the Kansas City Chiefs made Derrick Thomas the 4th overall pick. That decision would change the course of their franchise forever. From the moment he stepped onto the field, Thomas was electric. He was fast, explosive, and fearless, redefining what it meant to be a pass rusher. In just his rookie season, he recorded 10 sacks and earned Defensive Rookie of the Year honors. A year later, he cemented his status as an elite player with a jaw-dropping performance against the Seattle Seahawks, where he recorded 7 sacks in a single game, a record that still stands as one of the greatest individual feats in NFL history. His relentless energy and game-changing plays quickly made him a fan favorite, and Arrowhead Stadium erupted every time he lined up to terrorize a quarterback. Over the course of his 11-year career, Thomas collected 126.5 sacks, 9 Pro Bowl selections, and a reputation as one of the most feared linebackers in football. Yet his impact stretched beyond the numbers. He was the emotional leader of the Chiefs, a player whose presence lifted everyone around him. Off the field, he was known for his generosity and community involvement. In 1990, he founded the Derrick Thomas Third and Long Foundation, a program dedicated to helping children from single-parent homes succeed in school and life. Inspired by his own childhood struggles without a father, Thomas wanted to ensure that others had the support and mentorship he often longed for. But as much as he was beloved, Derrick Thomas's life was tragically cut short. On January 23, 2000, Thomas was driving to Kansas City International Airport with 2 friends when icy conditions caused his SUV to spin out of control. The vehicle rolled several times, and Thomas was thrown from it because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. 1 passenger died at the scene, while Thomas and another friend survived. The accident left Thomas paralyzed from the chest down, confined to a hospital bed as doctors tried to stabilize his condition. For weeks, the Kansas City community held its breath. Fans prayed, teammates visited, and the entire NFL watched closely, hoping that Thomas would recover. He had always seemed larger than life, a warrior on the field, and many believed his strength would carry him through. But complications set in. On February 8, 2000, just 2 weeks after the accident, Derrick Thomas suffered a massive blood clot and passed away. He was only 33 years old. The news devastated the Chiefs organization and their fans. Arrowhead Stadium, once filled with the thunder of his sacks and celebrations, became a place of mourning. Thousands attended his funeral, including teammates, coaches, and NFL legends who came to honor a man whose legacy had been carved, not just in stats, but in spirit. His death served as a painful reminder of how fragile life can be, even for those who seem invincible on the field. In the years that followed, Derrick Thomas's impact only grew. In 2009, nearly a decade after his death, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where his name joined the ranks of football's immortals. For Chiefs fans, it was a moment of bittersweet pride, recognition of a career that had been brilliant, but also heartbreak over the years of greatness lost. His foundation continued its work, carrying forward his dream of empowering children, ensuring that even in death, his influence lived on. Derrick Thomas remains one of the most iconic figures in Kansas City's history. His highlight reels still inspire awe. His records still stand as benchmarks of excellence, and his story still resonates as a tale of triumph, tragedy, and enduring legacy. To this day, fans at Arrowhead remember the roar of number 58, charging toward a quarterback, a force of nature who played with passion, heart, and relentless drive. Though his life was tragically short, Derrick Thomas's memory continues to shine, forever a Chief, forever a legend. Number 3, Chris Henry. Chris Henry's story is one of the most tragic tales in NFL history, not only because of how he died, but because of the haunting discoveries made after his passing. Born in Belchast, Louisiana, in 1983, Henry grew up with natural athletic ability and a drive that carried him into the national spotlight. His talent as a wide receiver at West Virginia University made him a standout prospect. Known for his deep speed and big play potential, NFL scouts saw him as the kind of player who could change the outcome of a game with a single catch, and the Cincinnati Bengals drafted him in the 3rd round of the 2005 NFL Draft. From that moment, he was expected to become a star. But Henry's career was often overshadowed by controversies. Despite his immense talent, his time in the NFL was marred by suspensions, arrests, and repeated brushes with the law. Between 2005 and 2007, he faced multiple suspensions for violating the league's conduct policy. Coaches and fans grew frustrated, but many still held on to hope that he would turn things around. Henry wasn't a villain at heart. Teammates often described him as soft-spoken and loyal to those he trusted. Yet he carried personal struggles that seemed impossible to escape. By 2009, Henry was trying to put his troubled past behind him. He had proposed to his longtime girlfriend, Lolini Tonga, and many close to him said he seemed to be turning a corner in life. It looked as though he was finally ready to focus on building a family and reclaiming his career. But the promise of redemption was cut short on December 16, 2009. That day, Henry was involved in a heated argument with Tonga outside their home in North Carolina. The dispute escalated, and as Tonga drove away in her truck, Henry jumped into the back of the moving vehicle. Witnesses later recounted the shocking scene as Henry clung desperately to the truck bed while it sped down a residential road. Moments later, tragedy struck. Henry fell from the vehicle and suffered catastrophic head injuries. He was rushed to the hospital, but by the next morning, at just 26 years old, Chris Henry was gone. The NFL world was stunned. Teammates, coaches, and fans struggled to process the news. Bengals quarterback Carson Palmer and coach Marvin Lewis both spoke of Henry as a young man who had been trying to change his life for the better. His death was not only heartbreaking, it was symbolic of wasted potential, of a life and career that could have been so much more. But perhaps the most haunting part of Henry's story came after his passing. In the months that followed, doctors examined his brain and found he had chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. This condition, caused by repeated head trauma, had been linked to depression, impulsivity, and sudden mood swings. Henry became the first active NFL player to be diagnosed with CTE after death. For many, this discovery reframed his life in a tragic new light. The anger issues, the off-field troubles, the emotional volatility, It could all be traced back to the hidden damage inside his brain. Henry's death and the revelations about CTE helped ignite a much larger conversation about the long-term risks of football. He became an unintentional face of a growing crisis in the NFL, one that would eventually lead to lawsuits, policy changes, and an increased awareness of head injuries in sports. In this sense, his tragedy carried a legacy far beyond his short career. Today, Chris Henry is remembered in two ways. To fans of the Bengals, he was a young receiver with enormous talent whose life ended too soon. To the wider football community, he is remembered as a pivotal figure in the conversation about player safety. His story underscores the fragility of NFL careers, the hidden dangers of the sport, and the way a promising life can be cut short in the blink of an eye. Chris Henry never got the chance to fulfill his potential on the field. Yet through the painful lessons learned from his life and death, his impact on the game continues. His name is spoken not just in mourning, but as a reminder of the cost of the game and the importance of protecting those who play it. Number 4. Fred Lane. Fred Lane's death remains one of the darkest and most unsettling tragedies in NFL history, not because it happened on the field, but because it unfolded in the place where he should have been safest, his own home. Born in Franklin, Tennessee in 1975, Lane wasn't the kind of athlete who was showered with praise from the start. He was undersized for a running back and overlooked by major colleges. Yet through determination and relentless work ethic, he found his way onto the roster at Lane College, a small historically black institution in Jackson, Tennessee. There he carved out a reputation as a tough, fearless runner with surprising speed and vision. Despite his talent, Lane went undrafted in 1997. For many players, that would have been the end of the dream. But Lane's resolve pushed him forward, and the Carolina Panthers signed him as a free agent. Almost immediately, he shocked critics by proving he belonged in the NFL. During his rookie year, he rushed for over 800 yards, including an electrifying 147-yard performance in his very first game as a starter. Fans fell in love with his underdog story, and teammates respected the way he carried himself both on and off the field. Lane's career, though brief, was filled with promise. He never had the fame of the league's biggest stars, but he was steady, consistent, and dependable. In 3 seasons with the Panthers, he rushed for nearly 2,000 yards and scored 13 touchdowns. He was traded to the Indianapolis Colts in 2000, and while the move surprised some fans, it was seen as a chance for him to take his career to the next level. Tragically, he never got that opportunity. On July 6, 2000, the shocking news broke. Fred Lane had been shot and killed in his own home in Charlotte, North Carolina. The details were chilling. His wife, Deidre Lane, had fired the fatal shots during a domestic dispute. Reports later revealed that the relationship had been volatile, with moments of tension and conflict that rarely made it into the public eye. According to police, Lane was shot at close range twice, in the chest and in the back of the head, as he walked through the front door. He was just 24 years old. The NFL world was shaken to its core. Players died tragically in accidents or from health issues, but to be murdered in such a personal and violent way was nearly unthinkable. Fans struggled to process how a young man with such a bright future could meet such an end. Lane's funeral drew an outpouring of grief, with teammates and friends remembering him not just as a talented running back, but as a man who always carried himself with humility and quiet strength. In the aftermath, the story only grew darker. Deidre Lane was later convicted of voluntary manslaughter and served several years in prison. Prosecutors argued that the murder had been premeditated, while her defense painted a picture of a toxic and abusive relationship. Regardless of the courtroom narratives, the fact remained that Fred Lane's life was taken far too soon, leaving behind his young daughter and a community in mourning. Lane's death sparked conversations about domestic violence in professional sports, a subject that remains painfully relevant even decades later. His story became a reminder that the struggles players face off the field can be just as dangerous as the hits they endure on it. The NFL, still grappling with how to handle issues of personal conduct, was forced to confront the reality that fame and athletic talent could not shield players from tragedy at home. Today, Fred Lane is remembered not only for the yards he gained or the touchdowns he scored, but for the light he brought into the locker room. He was a player who earned everything the hard way, a man who never gave up on his dream, and a father whose life was stolen before he had the chance to see it fully unfold. His story stands as a heartbreaking reminder of how quickly success can turn into sorrow, and how even in a sport defined by violence on the field, the most devastating blows can come from within. Number 5. Corey Stringer. Corey Stringer's story is one that still echoes through NFL history, not only for its tragedy, but for the sweeping changes it forced the league to confront. Born in Warren, Ohio, in 1974, Stringer was a mountain of a man from an early age. Standing 6'4" and weighing over 330 pounds, he seemed destined to dominate the football field. At Ohio State University, he became a standout offensive tackle, known for his power, size, and relentless drive. His success at the collegiate level made him a first-round draft pick for the Minnesota Vikings in 1995, a team already rich in offensive talent. From the moment he joined the Vikings, Stringer proved himself to be a cornerstone of the offensive line. Protecting quarterbacks and clearing the way for running backs, he became a reliable force who embodied toughness and discipline.
He wasn't the flashy star who made headlines with highlight plays, but he was the kind of player coaches and teammates valued deeply, dependable, consistent, and willing to put in the work. By 2000, he had earned a Pro Bowl selection, solidifying his place as one of the league's best at his position. But behind the strength and size, Stringer faced challenges that many large athletes endure. His weight and conditioning were constant battles, and the pressures of professional football only intensified them. Despite this, he pushed himself harder than most, determined to meet the demands of one of the league's most physically brutal positions. That drive to never quit would ultimately contribute to his untimely death. On July 31, 2001, tragedy struck during the Vikings training camp in Mankato, Minnesota. The weather was brutally hot and humid, with temperatures climbing into the high 90s and the heat index soaring well above 100 degrees. Players were pushed through exhausting drills, and Stringer, like many others, struggled in the oppressive conditions. He vomited repeatedly during practice but refused to quit. His pride as a professional athlete wouldn't allow him to show weakness or step away from the field. Coaches and staff urged him on, not realizing the danger he was in. By the end of practice, Stringer collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered his body temperature had spiked to 108 degrees, a catastrophic level. Despite desperate efforts to save him, Corey Stringer died of exertional heat stroke at just 27 years old. The news stunned the football world. A healthy young man in the prime of his career, gone in an instant, not from a violent hit or car accident, but from the very training meant to prepare him for the season. His death sent shockwaves far beyond Minnesota. Fans grieved the loss of a beloved player, but more importantly, the NFL was forced to reckon with the dangerous conditions athletes were enduring during training camps. Until that point, heat stroke and dehydration had often been dismissed as minor concerns, things players were expected to tough out. Stringer's death shattered that mindset. For the first time, the league recognized that pushing players past safe limits could be fatal. In the aftermath, major reforms followed. Teams introduced mandatory access to water and cooling stations, closer monitoring of players' core temperatures, and stricter medical oversight during practices. The NFL also began working with the Corey Stringer Institute, founded by his widow Kelsey, which became a leader in promoting heat safety not just in professional football, but across all levels of athletics. Today, every high school, college, and pro team benefits from protocols that were born from the lessons of that tragedy. Though Corey Stringer's career was cut tragically short, his legacy endures in a way few athletes do. He may no longer be remembered for his Pro Bowl selection or the blocks he made on the field, but he is remembered for something even greater: saving countless lives by forcing a sport to take responsibility for the safety of its players. In death, Stringer changed the NFL forever, leaving behind a legacy of protection and reform that ensures no athlete has to suffer the same fate. Number 6. Darrent Williams. The story of Darrent Williams is one of promise stolen far too soon. Born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1982, Williams grew up with a passion for football that carried him through challenges many young men face in difficult neighborhoods. He was undersized for a defensive back, standing just 5'8" and weighing around 180 pounds, but what he lacked in size he made up for in speed, tenacity, and heart. At Oklahoma State University, Williams made a name for himself as a fearless cornerback and return specialist. His agility and instinct on the field helped him stand out against larger opponents, eventually leading the Denver Broncos to select him in the second round of the 2005 NFL Draft. In Denver, Williams quickly earned a reputation as a player who played beyond his frame. His rookie season was marked by explosive plays and infectious energy that made him a fan favorite. Teammates described him as always smiling, always upbeat, and always willing to push himself harder than anyone else. By his second season, he had become a reliable starter in the Broncos secondary and one of the most promising young defenders in the league. At just 24 years old, his career was only beginning, and the Broncos believed they had found a long-term cornerstone in their defense. But behind the highlight reels and growing fame, Williams remained grounded. He was a dedicated father to his young children and often spoke about wanting to create a better future for them. His teammates admired his balance of humility and confidence, a rare blend that made him both approachable and inspiring. The city of Denver embraced him not just as a football player but as a young man who embodied hope and resilience. That sense of promise came to a heartbreaking end on New Year's Eve 2006, just hours after Williams and the Broncos had played their final game of the season. Williams attended a nightclub party in Denver with several teammates, including star receiver Javon Walker. The celebration turned tense after an altercation inside the club, though Williams himself was not directly involved. As the group left in a limousine in the early hours of January 1, 2007, tragedy struck. A vehicle pulled up alongside them and opened fire in a drive-by shooting. Williams was struck in the neck and killed instantly. He was only 24 years old. 2 other passengers were injured but survived. The shocking news rippled through the NFL like a lightning bolt. Just hours earlier, fans had watched him play on the field, full of life and energy, only to wake up to headlines announcing his death. For the Broncos, the loss was unbearable. Players and coaches described the atmosphere as surreal, a mixture of disbelief, grief, and anger. The investigation revealed the shooting stemmed from gang-related tensions connected to individuals present at the nightclub that night. Though Williams himself was innocent and uninvolved in the conflict, he became the tragic victim of violence that had nothing to do with him. In 2012, Willie D. Clark was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison for the shooting, but the verdict did little to ease the pain of Williams' family, teammates, and fans. Williams' death forced the NFL to confront a harsh reality. Players, despite their fame and fortune, were not shielded from the dangers of violence off the field. The Broncos honored him with tributes throughout the following season, and his number 27 jersey became a symbol of both remembrance and heartbreak. Former teammates have spoken often about how his loss reminded them to value life beyond the game, to take care of their families, and to cherish every moment. Even today, nearly 2 decades later, Darrent Williams is remembered not only as a dynamic young player but as a man whose life represented perseverance and promise. His story remains one of the NFL's most sobering tragedies, a reminder that greatness on the field can be overshadowed in an instant by violence off it. His legacy lives on in Denver, where fans still speak his name with reverence, mourning what could have been but celebrating the joy he brought during his short time in the game. Number 7. Marquise Hill. Marquise Hill's story is a heartbreaking reminder that tragedy can strike when least expected, yet within that tragedy can emerge acts of undeniable heroism. Born in New Orleans in 1982, Hill grew up in a city where football was more than a sport, it was a way of life. A standout at De La Salle High School, he became one of the top defensive line prospects in the nation, combining immense size with rare athleticism. His path led him to Louisiana State University, where he played under head coach Nick Saban and became a dominant presence on the defensive line. At LSU, Hill was a part of the Tigers' 2003 national championship team, helping cement his reputation as one of the country's best young defensive talents. In 2004, the New England Patriots selected Hill in the second round of the NFL Draft, adding him to a roster already known for its depth and competitiveness. For Hill, joining the Patriots meant stepping into an environment defined by discipline, excellence, and relentless pursuit of championships. Though he never became a full-time starter on the defensive line, Hill was valued for his work ethic, his presence in the locker room, and his willingness to put the team above himself. Coaches and teammates described him as someone who always had a smile, who lifted others' spirits, and who never allowed ego to get in the way of teamwork. Off the field, Hill was deeply tied to his roots. After Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans in 2005, he dedicated himself to helping his community rebuild. He was known to donate supplies, lend support to displaced families, and maintain close ties with those struggling in the aftermath. Hill never forgot where he came from, and his commitment to others revealed a man whose priorities extended beyond football. He was a professional athlete, but above all, he was a son of New Orleans who carried his community with him wherever he went. On May 27, 2007, tragedy struck. Hill was riding a jet ski with a female companion on Lake Pontchartrain, just outside of New Orleans. The water was choppy, and neither he nor his passenger was wearing a life jacket. At some point, the jet ski flipped, throwing both into the dark waters of the lake. In those harrowing moments, Hill's instincts as both an athlete and a protector took over. Instead of fighting to save himself, he focused on keeping his companion afloat. He guided her toward a buoy, held her steady, and reassured her that help was coming. Witnesses later confirmed that his actions directly saved her life. By the time rescuers arrived, Hill had disappeared beneath the water. His body was recovered the following day, and news of his death spread rapidly. He was only 24 years old. The NFL community was stunned, and the Patriots organization in particular mourned deeply. Head coach Bill Belichick, known for his stoicism, described Hill as a great young man who had a positive impact on everyone he touched. Teammates echoed the sentiment, remembering not only his talent but his loyalty, humor, and kindness. Hill's funeral drew hundreds of mourners, from teammates to family members to those he had quietly helped in New Orleans. The city embraced him as both a fallen son and a hero, someone whose final act reflected the selflessness he had shown throughout his life. Though his career with the Patriots had been brief and largely under the radar compared to stars of his era, Hill's death resonated far beyond the game. His story became one not of football stats or championships, but of courage, sacrifice, and the ultimate expression of love for another human being. Today, Marquise Hill is remembered as more than just a defensive lineman. He is remembered as a man who, in his final moments, chose another's life over his own. That choice, made in the waters of Lake Pontchartrain, forever defined his legacy. His name still evokes a mixture of grief and admiration, a reminder that true greatness is not measured in games won or tackles made, but in the character revealed when it matters most. Number 8, Gaines Adams. The death of Gaines Adams in January 2010 was one of the most shocking and unexpected tragedies in recent NFL history. At just 26 years old, the former first-round draft pick had seemingly unlimited potential and was entering what many considered the prime years of his career. His sudden passing due to cardiac arrest stunned the football world and served as a sobering reminder of how fragile life can be, even for world-class athletes in peak physical condition. Born in Greenwood, South Carolina in 1983, Gaines Adams grew up with a love for football. At Cambridge Academy, a small private school, he dominated the field as a wide receiver and defensive end, showcasing rare athleticism that made him stand out even in a small-town setting. Though he was not heavily recruited at first, his persistence and raw ability eventually earned him a scholarship to Clemson University. It was at Clemson where Adams truly began to blossom into a star. During his college years, Adams developed into one of the most feared pass rushers in the country. By his senior year in 2006, he was named a unanimous All-American and won the ACC Defensive Player of the Year award. His speed off the edge, combined with his long frame and relentless motor, made him a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks. NFL scouts took notice, and when the 2007 NFL Draft arrived, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made Adams the 4th overall pick. The expectations for him were immense. He was viewed as a cornerstone for the team's defense for years to come. Adams' rookie season showed flashes of what made him such a highly touted prospect. He recorded 6 sacks and quickly established himself as a disruptive presence. The Buccaneers believed they had found their defensive anchor, and his teammates described him as quiet, humble, and deeply focused on improving his craft. But as the seasons went on, Adams struggled to consistently reach the lofty expectations placed on him. He showed promise but never quite broke through into stardom. By 2009, Tampa Bay decided to move on, trading him to the Chicago Bears midway through the season. In Chicago, Adams had the chance for a fresh start. He joined a defense that already boasted stars like Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs, and many believed he still had time to unlock his full potential. At only 26, he was still young enough to develop into the player teams imagined when he was drafted so highly. Coaches noted his willingness to adapt and his eagerness to prove himself, and there was cautious optimism about his future with the Bears. That optimism was cut tragically short on January 17, 2010. Adams collapsed at his home in Greenwood, South Carolina, and was rushed to the emergency room, where he was pronounced dead. The cause was determined to be cardiac arrest caused by an enlarged heart, a condition that had gone undetected. His death was both sudden and deeply shocking. For teammates, fans, and family, it was incomprehensible that a man so young, so physically gifted, and seemingly healthy could be gone in an instant. The NFL community reacted with grief and disbelief. Coaches and players from both the Buccaneers and Bears expressed sorrow over his passing. Lovie Smith, then head coach of the Bears, described him as a class young man who had a bright future ahead of him. His Clemson family was equally devastated, with former teammates recalling his quiet confidence, his work ethic, and the joy he brought to the locker room. His jersey and memory remain cherished in Clemson football circles, where he had once been the heart of their defense. Gaines Adams' death became a painful reminder of the hidden dangers athletes can face. Even those who appear to be in peak physical condition are not immune to undetected health issues. In the years following his passing, his story has been referenced in conversations about increased cardiac screening for athletes, as teams sought to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. Though his professional career was brief, Adams left behind the memory of a gifted player whose life was full of promise. He will forever be remembered as a Tiger who dominated at Clemson, a top draft pick who chased his dreams in the NFL, and a young man whose life ended far too soon. His story is one of talent, hope, and the cruel unpredictability of fate. Number 9, Kenny McKinley. The story of Kenny McKinley is one of the most heartbreaking chapters in NFL history, not because of a career cut short by injury or accident, but because of the invisible battle he was fighting inside. At only 23 years old, McKinley died by suicide in September 2010, a tragedy that shocked the league and brought much-needed awareness to the importance of mental health, even among athletes who seem to have it all. His passing reminded the world that depression and emotional struggles can affect anyone, regardless of fame, success, or physical strength. Born in Mableton, Georgia in 1987, McKinley was known early on for his charisma and infectious smile. He was the kind of player who lifted the spirits of his teammates both on and off the field. At South Cobb High School, he excelled as a quarterback, earning attention for his athleticism and leadership. When he transitioned to wide receiver at the University of South Carolina, he quickly became a household name within the program. By the time he finished his college career, McKinley had broken school records for receptions and receiving yards, surpassing legends like Sterling Sharp and Sidney Rice. He was beloved by fans and respected by teammates for his determination and upbeat personality. Despite his college success, McKinley entered the NFL with the odds stacked against him. He was drafted in the 5th round of the 2009 NFL Draft by the Denver Broncos, a spot that often forces players to fight for recognition. But true to his reputation, McKinley embraced the challenge with enthusiasm. He played primarily on special teams as a rookie and worked tirelessly in practice, eager to prove himself worthy of a bigger role. Coaches described him as energetic and positive, always the first to celebrate a teammate's success, even if his own opportunities were limited. But beneath the smile, McKinley was struggling. Injuries began to derail his dream. By his second season, he was placed on injured reserve due to a knee problem that kept him sidelined. For a young player trying to carve out a future in the league, the setback was devastating. Friends later revealed that McKinley had confided in them about his financial worries and feelings of hopelessness. The pressure of being unable to provide for his young son, combined with the uncertainty of his career, weighed heavily on him. On September 20, 2010, the devastating news broke. McKinley had been found dead at his home in Arapahoe County, Colorado from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Broncos organization and the NFL community were stunned. McKinley, the smiling and energetic young man everyone thought they knew, had been silently suffering. His death forced players, coaches, and fans alike to confront the reality that mental health struggles are often hidden and that athletes, despite their strength and determination, are not immune to depression. In the aftermath, teammates and coaches spoke of their grief and disbelief. Broncos quarterback Kyle Orton said McKinley had always been one of the most cheerful guys in the locker room, a sentiment echoed by many others. Former South Carolina coach Steve Spurrier, heartbroken, called him one of my all-time favorites. The pain of his loss rippled across both the college and professional football worlds, leaving many to wonder how someone so full of life on the outside could be hurting so deeply inside. McKinley's death also sparked broader conversations about the NFL's role in addressing mental health. At the time, the league had few resources dedicated to players struggling with depression or emotional challenges. His tragedy became part of a growing push for better support systems, counseling services, and open dialogue about the pressures players face. Since then, the NFL and NFLPA have made strides in improving mental health resources, but McKinley's story remains a haunting reminder of why such efforts are necessary. Today, Kenny McKinley is remembered not just as a promising young receiver, but as a man whose life, though short, left a lasting impact. His infectious energy at South Carolina and his determination with the Broncos still inspire those who knew him. More importantly, his story has helped shed light on the critical importance of mental health awareness. For fans, teammates, and future players, McKinley's legacy is one of compassion, awareness, and the reminder to always look beyond the surface when it comes to the well-being of those we care about. Number 10. Dwayne Haskins. The death of Dwayne Haskins in April 2022 was one of the most shocking tragedies in recent NFL memory. At only 24 years old, Haskins was still considered a quarterback with untapped potential, a young man who had already achieved his dream of reaching the NFL but was still fighting to prove himself. His sudden passing on a Florida highway stunned the football world, not only because of his age but because of the sense that his story was still being written. Born in Highland Park, New Jersey in 1997, Haskins grew up with a football in his hand and dreams of becoming an NFL quarterback. His family later moved to Maryland, where his reputation as a talented passer grew rapidly. He attended Bullis School in Potomac, where his arm strength and field vision made him one of the most highly sought-after recruits in the country. By the time he committed to Ohio State, expectations were sky-high, and Haskins did not disappoint. At Ohio State, Haskins cemented his name in college football history during the 2018 season. Taking over as the starting quarterback, he shattered Big Ten records by throwing for 4,831 yards and 50 touchdowns, earning himself a spot as a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. His performance in the Big Ten championship game, where he threw 5 touchdowns against Northwestern, was the kind of moment that scouts dream about. Analysts across the nation saw him as one of the most promising quarterback prospects of his generation, combining raw arm talent with poise under pressure. That potential led to him being selected in the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft by Washington, 15th overall. It was a dream come true, but the NFL can be an unforgiving place. Haskins' rookie season was marked by flashes of brilliance mixed with growing pains. Washington, at the time, was a franchise in turmoil, and Haskins was thrust into a difficult situation where stability was scarce. Still, his confidence and resilience gave many fans hope that he could be the long-term answer at quarterback. His time in Washington, however, proved to be turbulent. Struggles on the field, combined with criticism about his maturity and preparation, led to his release in 2020 after less than 2 full seasons. For many young quarterbacks, such an early setback could have spelled the end of their career, but Haskins refused to let go of his dream. In 2021, he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he was given a second chance to learn behind veterans like Ben Roethlisberger. Coaches praised his work ethic, noting that he seemed more determined than ever to rebuild his reputation and make the most of his opportunity. But fate would intervene before that chance could fully unfold. On April 9, 2022, Haskins was in Florida training with several Steelers teammates, part of his commitment to improve and prepare for the upcoming season. In the early hours of the morning while walking on Interstate 595 near Fort Lauderdale, he was struck by a dump truck and killed instantly. The details of the accident shocked the public, and questions lingered about why he was on the highway at that moment. But the overwhelming reaction was one of grief, the loss of a young man whose life and career had ended far too soon. The outpouring of tributes that followed spoke volumes about the impact Haskins had on those around him. Steelers coach Mike Tomlin described him as one of our hardest workers and a great teammate. Former Ohio State coach Urban Meyer called him a legend who had brought joy to Buckeye fans everywhere. Even players who had faced him on the field remembered him for his kindness, positivity, and relentless spirit. His funeral in New Jersey was attended by hundreds, including teammates, coaches, and family members who spoke of his big smile, his bigger heart, and the love he had for the game of football. Dwayne Haskins' story is a painful reminder of how fragile life can be. In football terms, his career was incomplete, filled with promise that never had the chance to fully bloom. But beyond the statistics and the headlines, he was a son, a husband, and a teammate whose memory lives on in the lives he touched. For fans, his legacy will always be tied to that magical 2018 season at Ohio State, when he lit up college football and showed the world just how bright his future could be.